I had an absolutely stunning morning spearfishing off the Llyn Peninsula. I shot some genuinely big pollock. Here's the video. If you enjoy it, give it a like and subscribe. It really helps me out and helps the channel grow. Now I got up really early, got up at 3 o'clock and I got into the water at 4 AM. This is first light here, well before sunrise. This is undoubtedly the time to target big pollock. But I started out looking for flatfish. I'd heard this mark hold some turbot occasionally. They do get caught by the line anglers. I had a little scout around, spent about 20 minutes looking for flatfish. There were no imprints, no sign of them. And generally I find that if you're going to see any flatfish, you generally see some sort of sign within 20 minutes. If there's no imprints or no markings, no sign of them, you might as well just move on. And by this point the light levels had increased a bit. It was light enough to spearfish properly, so I decided to target some bass in the shallows. First dive, a big shoal came in. Most of them looked a bit undersized, but I picked out pretty much the final bass in the shoal. Now in water this clear, the viz was close to 10 metres here. It's quite difficult to size up the fish, and this bass looked like it was about 42 to 45, but actually it was over 50. You can see in this next clip, just glowing gold and in that perfect dawn light, it's a fairly decent fish, so I was pretty happy with that. Now I had a look for pollock after this, but all I was seeing was these very small fish of 20 to 25 centimetres. Generally, if all you're seeing is very small ones like this, it's time to move on. Now, when I'm hunting pollock, I like to hit a lot of different marks, because if they're there, they come in instantly, like you'll see in the clips that are coming up. Often you've only got to do 25 to 40 second dives to shoot big pollock. If you're lying on the bottom holding your breath for ages, then generally it means there's no fish there. That's a mistake I've certainly made in the past. And it was time to move on. Now I'd memorised the map at the National Trust car park. I actually walked about 3 kilometres down the coast path and found an area with strong current. I always find that strong currents seem to produce more fish for me. And you can see here just how strong it is. I'm getting washed along this headland. It's a good idea to stay very close to the headland in case you get taken out by a riptide. But these areas do often hold bass on the points of the headlands. The bass seem to get funneled past. You can see here I'm just hanging on the rock. I'm literally holding onto a rock here. Let myself go a bit. And I did have a couple of dives in the current. You'll often find schools of bass absolutely surge past, just flying through at pace. It can be very exciting spearfishing. You see the kelp flattened here by this fast current going through at about walking pace. Now, bizarrely, I actually shot a large pollock off the surface in 1.5 metres of water. I couldn't quite believe what I was seeing when it first came in. There was a shoal of sand eels, and it was hanging just underneath the shoal of sand eels. And this is a fairly reasonable fish. It's over 60 centimetres long. You can see it on my fin there. You know, it's the size of the fin. I've never shot a pollock off the surface before, but I've got a theory that in low light levels, pollock come into much shallower water, and you'll see this through the next clips in the video. It was a pretty good start to the session. Now, one thing that really surprised me in an area this remote was to find a fishing float that was stuck in the kelp. It genuinely surprised me anyone had lugged all their fishing gear that far. But I had a few dives, and instantly the pollock were coming in. This is a fish of about 3 pounds, about 55 centimetres. And I took my time, made sure of a good shot. Now, I'm going to go through the anatomy of this mark, because this is a very particular mark. There was a headland with a current surging past. This is a bay, just in the slack area. You can see a very steep area of cliff to my right, and you can see the sand line marked by the blue on the left. I've often found the sand line is a very productive area for pollock. I was told that by a very good South African Spearo on Sky last year. You can see the corner here. Fish often congregate in these kind of corners. Now, I saw a number of bass from the surface, and what's very interesting is you often see bass on the surface, but you never see pollock. And as I dive down, just look what was hanging in this bass shoal. I go onto the edge of the cliff here and just look up, and there's 2 big pollock there straight away. You don't see these from the surface. And I put in a reasonable shot, but this pollock was fighting very, very hard. I didn't quite realise how big it was until I got it up to the surface. This was a particularly nice fish. This fish was 71 centimetres, so a very nice pollock indeed. Now interestingly, my flopper hadn't engaged properly in this fish. I've got a pathos spear, see it's engaged there. A lot of people prefer the Rob Allen spears or even a double flopper when fishing with pollock, but I like the Rob Allen spear. The Rob Allen spear has a much bigger flopper than the pathos, but it's a much heavier spear. Anyway, I was showing this pollock off for the camera and I'd killed it and it just has one last kick of life, and I was like, oh no, served me right for trying to show it off. So I dived down and fortunately I managed to find it again. I'd have been absolutely gutted to lose a fish like that and also kill such a nice fish to be fed to the crabs, but you know, it was literally dead. It just had a few little twitches left in it. But it's a good lesson. Never take your fish off the spear before it's on your stringer. Now, with large pollock like this in existence, if you see a fish that's not big, it's best to not shoot it. You can see a perfectly acceptable coalfish here. I love shooting and eating coalfish, but I leave this. The more shots you fire, the more likely you are to spook genuinely large fish. And the very next dive, I dropped down again a bit deeper. As the light levels were increasing, I started to go deeper. I tucked myself very nicely behind this bit of kelp, and an inquisitive pollock just slowly cruises in. And I wait for it to turn and make absolutely sure of the shot. This was another fish of over 70 centimetres. I couldn't quite believe the average size of pollock at this mark. I'd never come across anywhere like this in North Wales before. There's obviously lots of marks off Cornwall and Devon that hold pollock like this, but Wales is more known for its bass. Wales is not really known as a pollock spearfishing location, but perhaps this area towards the tip of the Llyn Peninsula and the Barnsley Sound could be worth further investigation. And you can see here I'm a bit deeper, about 12 metres here, as the sun had really started to come up. I've got great cover to my left, and that's meaning there's no silhouette of me. I'm looking around, scanning, and you'll see a pollock just cruising from behind me. Now it's interesting how this larger pollock is sat almost in the kelp. You often find this with the bigger pollock, that the small pollock will just cruise around in the open above the kelp, but you've really got to scan quite carefully to look for those big pollock in the kelp. And you can see there I really took my time with the shot. You have a lot of time to shoot a large pollock. They don't tend to spook unless you make some kind of random sudden movement or release some bubbles. They just don't spook, and you really have got a lot of time to make sure of your shot. Despite that, you can see my shot here is about 3 to 4 centimetres too low.
What a fucking stunning catch. 5 big pollock and a nice bass. Absolutely stupendous morning.
It was time to try and look for a different species. Already shot some bass and pollock. I was hoping for a coalfish, and the sand line like this is often a productive area for coalfish. Now interestingly, you don't really get a lot of coalfish off Anglesey, but off the North Llyn you do get quite a few, and it's my belief they prefer areas where there's much deeper water close by. There's water down to about 50 or 60 metres quite close to where these fish are. And I think that seems to hold more large pollock and certainly coalfish. Now you can see some very small bass here. These are very obviously under the minimum size. Don't shoot bass like these, nowhere near legal. So I pick out this nice coalfish around 40 centimetres. Pretty happy with this. I absolutely love the taste of coalfish. It's kind of halfway between a mackerel and a pollock, a slightly oily sort of fish. They don't get that big, or in deep water, and off Norway apparently they get pretty big, but the ones you see in the UK generally aren't that big. And it was an absolutely superb session. I had about 2 hours sleep and a massive walk back along the coast path, but it was well worth it to get up for fish like these. Shot 5 big pollock, a 50 centimetre bass and a nice coalfish. Had absolutely stunning scenery throughout the session. This is from midway back on the walk. Yeah, absolutely amazing day. And I was just so happy with the size of the pollock. I shot 3 pollock of over 70 centimetres. I've very rarely seen pollock of that size before, and I was so glad to actually get something. You see me smiling here. It's very, very rare for me to smile on camera. So I must have been pretty happy with these fish. It's a shame they'd lost a bit of their colour though, because they'd been out of the water for so long on that walk back. One thing I always do is make sure I scale and fillet my fish at the sea. That way you can throw the carcasses back in the sea to feed some crabs, which in turn will feed more pollock, and it also makes a really horrible mess of your kitchen sink if you have to scale fish in the sink. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that video. I do try and add as much value as I can and give as many tips as I can possibly give. If you did enjoy the video, please do give it a like, subscribe to the channel. Helps me out, helps the channel grow, and you'll see plenty more videos like this in the future. Until that point, enjoy the summer and hope you have some great dive sessions.